Now let's talk with David Beckmann. David, thank you so much for being here with us. We're really grateful to have you. There's so many insightful things you said in your message. I don't want us to lose sight of the spiritual aspect of this. Certainly, you said getting food to the hungry is sacred work. But I want to get to some of the details as well, and starting with those numbers that are very stark. 1 in 5 children, 1 billion people. Why is this not more of a presidential priority?
Well, it comes back to us. It's got to be a priority for us.
Right.
I see our elected leaders. I think on both sides of the aisle, these are good people, but they are very responsive to what the voters want. And I don't think hungry people are really a priority to active voters. They're hearing, cut taxes, keep taxes low. They're hearing don't cut programs for the middle class. And then right now, every lobbyist in the world has descended on Washington to try to influence the decisions of the next few months. People like us need to say, look, hungry and poor people are important to me. Don't take it out on them.
I think one of the issues about identifying hunger in America is that a lot of voters look around, they say, I don't see hungry people. I see an obesity problem. I see other issues. I can't believe that 1 in 5 households are hungry. Can you unpack that for us?
Well, the incidence of obesity is actually higher among low-income people, and it's often the same folks. So people in our country, the kind of hunger that's very widespread is intermittent hunger. People eat cheap food if they don't have much money, and then at the end of the month they run out. So especially moms, they may protect their kids, so the moms may go for 4 days without virtually any food. And then when they get food, then they may binge eat, and little kids who don't get enough food have their metabolism messed up for the rest of their lives so that they're likely to get obese. So there is a lot of hunger in our country, and ironically, it's sometimes people who look fat.
And is there also the issue of food deserts, that there are certain, urban areas, for example, that don't have a grocery store where you can get nutritious food? And how does that play in?
That's part of it. But the main thing is people don't have money. If people in those neighborhoods had money, the grocery stores would go there. That's the problem. People run out of money. And if you run out of money, you got to pay your rent. If you got a cell phone, you got to keep the cell phone. You can skimp on food for 4, 5, 6 days.
The point that Lillian's making is interesting to me, and you and I were talking about this briefly before. It feels a little abstract, okay? The work you do is so important on the front lines in Washington, D.C., and I know you're asking all of us the story about Mike Hawk was fantastic on a local level. Right. Why is this still so difficult to get and to jump on board with? And you on the front lines of the Washington process, writing letters to congressmen, can you help me understand, make that more personal? Because it seems like a wonderful intellectual thing to do, but just hard to get.
I do think that's part of the problem. Okay. People would like to go to the soup kitchen and ladle soup to somebody that they see. But in fact, advocacy affects hungry people by the millions. And it was brought home to me a few years ago. I have 2 adopted sons. And when my older boy searched for his birth mother, she right away joined Bread for the World. I was thinking, what's this about? Well, she Googled us, and she saw that Bread for the World members fight for the national nutrition programs. And when she was pregnant with Andrew, she didn't have very much money, and she used one of the national nutrition programs to provide nutritious food to the baby who became my son. So if anybody wants to see a real person who benefited from advocacy for hungry people, here I am. My son is wonderfully, he's bright and creative and healthy. He might not be quite as bright if she hadn't been able to use the National Nutrition Program.
I think that's a wonderful human face to the political issue. But do you ever run into resistance from religious organizations and faith communities who say, look, we want to collect food, we want to dole out the soup, but writing letters to Congress, that crosses a line into the world of the political. How do you answer that?
Are you talking about the separation of church and state piece here?
Exactly,
Okay.
and asking people to take up an offering of letters to Congress, for example, around a particular farm bill. How do you negotiate that?
Well, actually, I think nowadays leaders of faith groups and charities all get, many of them get the notion that if we're serious about helping hungry people, you've got to speak up for the poor. So food banks and lots of churches are involved in that. I think at the level of the leadership, it's not an issue now. Some other people, may be resistant, but then I just think the logic is clear, and for Christians, Muslims, and Jews, it is biblical. This is, the God of the Bible cares about nations and laws, not just about how we behave as individuals. And so if we're just thinking about, I'm going to help somebody in an individual way, that is not consistent with an understanding of God who is big, the God of history, who judges the nations by how we treat poor and hungry people.
Can you integrate those two things, David? By that I mean you're talking with politicians and lobbyists in Washington, D.C. that have agendas that they are responsible for. In your conversations with these people, is there some biblical language, some religious language that you have with them to discuss the reality of this incredible problem?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it depends on who. But
Right.
we recently, a group of religious leaders recently met with President Obama for 40 minutes.
Tell us a little bit more about that, sure.
And, he's a man of faith. And so we started out by praying, asking if we could pray for him. And we ended up, the head of the Lutheran Church read a passage from the New Testament about not neglecting to do good. So we started and ended with God. And in fact, the president himself talked about protecting the least of these. I was struck. It just came up as part of the conversation. But then there's nothing in the Bible about food stamps. Right. But I think there's a lot in the Bible about poor people. And there's a short step from what the Bible says about justice for poor people and food stamps or other programs of assistance.
So do you think that there's any possibility with everything President Obama faces that perhaps he could be the president who champions this cause and lets it be in his top 5?
I think it depends on us. Right now, obviously the president, the Republicans control the majority of the House. The president doesn't run the country by himself. And wonderfully, we have a democracy where we really do run the country. If people of faith in this country get out of the pew and in fact let their elected representatives know that they want to see the progress that's possible for hungry and poor people, struggling people in our own country and around the world, this right now could be the time when we make changes that 5 years from now we could have dramatically less hunger in our country. And 10, 15 years from now, we could have dramatically less hunger in the world.
I'll ask you kind of a nuanced question about positioning, because I'm sure you think about this all the time, right? You talk about hunger, and then you talk about poverty, and they're clearly interrelated, but is there a more effective way to have a conversation with people about this, or do you have to talk about both and that connection to really help drive this home?
I mean, it's kind of the same thing, and I tend to talk about both because I think when we hear hunger, we think, I got to help. Mm-hmm. And also for religious people, it's man in the desert feeding the 5,000, give us this day our daily bread. So hunger pulls us in. But sometimes when you talk about hunger, we think, I'll give somebody a bowl of soup. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't solve the problem for very long. When you talk about poverty, then I got to help that guy get a job. So that's the best solution to hunger. So when you talk about hunger and poverty together, I think it brings people in, but then focuses on helping people get up on their feet and feed their own kids. That's what we got to do.
Very briefly, from your own faith background and upbringing, what inspired you to devote your life to this cause?
Well, I'm a Lutheran. I was baptized as an infant, and really that was true from before I learned how to speak. I knew that God loved me. And I think I am deeply grounded in God's love and forgiveness, and I just don't think you can, bathe in the love and forgiveness of God and then not be somewhat responsive when people have trouble.
That's a beautiful way to close our interview. Thank you.